Hello, my name is Brianna, and today we are going to be making a bowl cozy. To be able to make a bowl cozy, you will be needing a few things. You will need fabric, which you can cut 11 by 11, 10 by 10, or 12 by 12. You will also need batting, and whatever measurements you do the fabric will be the same measurement you will do for batting. You will need to cut out two 11 by 11 inch fabric, or whatever number you choose. You will also need those to be 100% cotton and be able to be microwavable. You will need a measuring tool or a ruler of some sort, scissors, fabric rotary cutter, thread, a bobbin, a marking tool, and a sewing machine. For this bowl cozy, I decided to use two different patterns. I am going to be doing the 11 by 11 inch. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to take the wrong side of the fabric and one piece of the batting, lining up all the corners. It doesn't have to be perfect because you'll end up fixing it later, but rough estimate like that for both pieces. The next step is we're going to sew from one corner to another and then one corner to another. So you're going to have an X. It might be easier if you use a marking tool and try and make a line so you can easily sew along it, or maybe you could eye it, but that usually doesn't make it perfect. To start this, we'll start on one of the corners to start the X. Make sure that you go forward a few and go back. It's okay if it doesn't reach all the way to the corner of the corner, because we will end up cutting the corners off to make it more of a round bowl. So it's okay right now if it doesn't go all the way to the edge. But you're going to just continue, and if you have a line, you'd follow the line. Usually when I get to the end of one, and because I like making a few at a time, so I'm just going to put this right here just so I can start going into the next one. Of course, you'll want to go into your backward stitch and then go forward. And this will complete the same step. Once you have one line done, you will now make the other corners match. For this next step, the measurements kind of change depending on which measurements you did for the length and height. Since I'm doing 11 by 11, it's going to be 2 inches and 1 inch up. But if you're doing the 12 inch or something, it's going to be a little different. You kind of have to play around with it a little bit. But your length will always be double of your height. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold your pretty sides together. And make sure your cross kind of matches. And what you're going to do is measure 2 inches this way and mark it, and then 1 inch upwards, and you will continue doing this on every side. Once you do it on this side, you're going to unfold it and then do these sides as well. Whenever you're done marking, and if you unfold it, it should look something similar to this, where you should have the length dot and the height dot, and when it's folded it should look similar to this. The next step that you're going to do is you're going to sew from the length to the height, so wherever you marked your dots for measurement, that is where you will be sewing. And you're going to do that for every side as when it's folded. As we're sewing, make sure to remember to line up all your edges so it's not wonky or anything. but we're going to be sewing at an angle. And do not forget to do your back stitch. And kind of just let it run off the side. Like that. And you will repeat that for every corner on both sheets. When you're done sewing one side, it should look like this, where it's at an angle, and then you'll repeat the same for folding this in half this way. And it's going to be a little different trying to fold it this way because it's already at a weird angle. So you're still just going to repeat the same steps from this dot to that dot on both of them. Your next step, because you don't want bulks in your actual bag, what you're going to do not cut on this side. Cut on this side that doesn't really matter if you cut it. It could be close, it could just make sure that it's not the full corner. You can leave it in there, but it will end up becoming bulky in your bag later. So what you're going to do is finish this for every corner of your bag on all sides. So when you're done cutting all the corners, it should look similar to this. And if your stitching doesn't look the prettiest, it's okay. The only part they're going to see is this side, the inside fabric. And even then, it doesn't have to be the world's prettiest thing. But if it's on the inside and you're like, oh my gosh, that looks bad, like right here, I kind of messed up a little where I double sewed, no one's going to look at it, so you should be fine. The next step is to unfold both fabric. And so since you're going to have, this is the outside of both of them, you're going to put pretty sides together and try and match up the corners as much as you can. You may have to rotate them a little bit just to try and get different corners to match up and everything. But when you're done with this, it should kind of line up like that. And so you're just putting them together. Now with the next step, what you're going to do is you're going to go along the edge of every corner, sewing 1/4 inch from the side all the way around, but you will need to leave maybe from here to here, depending on how good you are in turning things inside out, because the 1.5 inch should be enough, but that's a really important step for later. But right now, just make sure you sew along the edge, keeping a little section open that's not sewed. I personally like starting to sew on the line that we already made. So again, we're also going to do the back stitch when we first get done. And so it's going to be a little weird with the divot, but make sure, again, it's lined up as much as possible. And if you have a lot of this, sometimes you can open them up like this, and it helps if you iron them a little bit, but you don't really need to. Making sure that the batter and the batting, make sure that stays up, because sometimes that can show through if you aren't careful. Now on a corner, you have two, on a corner, whenever you get to a corner, you have two different options. You can kind of just sew along with it and curve with it, or you can also go to where you've already sewn and use your hand wheel. And using your hand wheel, you can put the needle in, so making sure the needle is halfway in, and just lift and pivot. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to curve it. So now we're starting to get towards the end. And again, I'm checking to make sure the batting lines up. for me, that's probably a good stopping point for most people. It looks like quite a bit of a gap, but you will need the room. But I'm gonna go a little further and then rewind, because you'll end up sewing this part after you flip it inside out. For me, I like to make sure that all the batting is on the opposite side of the stitching. So like right here, I kind of messed up where the batting is kind of outside of the sewn areas. So I may want to go back over that and re-sew that, because sometimes it likes popping up on the opposite side. So just making sure you go around and make sure you look at all of them. And I'm saying it's just that one part that I may have to re-go over. But once you're done making sure you're sewing done and everything, I kind of like just cutting the corners a little bit again, because of the it kind of blocks it in the corners. So I kind of just like getting rid of the extra material that isn't needed. And I do that for 3 corners. The one I leave open is wherever we leave this space open to turn our bag. I usually don't cut that. I mean, you can nip it right there just a little bit, but I tend to keep the side open. Now the next thing that we have to do is finding our open area, making sure you're getting the 2 fabric sides, and I kind of like just putting my fingers there, grabbing the opposite corner, and kind of just pulling that through. That's usually what I find the easiest, instead of just trying to gather all the material and everything. And so I may have sewn it a little too much, but you're just going to kind of go back and forth with it, because you don't want to rip the seams or anything. So now when it's undone, it kind of looks a little funky. So you're just going to try and find all the corners and everything, kind of make it look a little more natural. And just pulling the corners out to just make it look nice like that. And of course, since this is open now, I usually just fold this in, and then you're going to sew again 1/4. And I usually like, so since my stitch ends there, I usually like going a little further just to make sure it's secure and then that nothing's coming out. Because your material is so thick up here, usually you want to start down lower. So again, try and find the hole. So I want to start a little bit more up near this flower. And you'll usually want to go a little bit on slower speeds for this, just to make sure your needle doesn't break or anything. Again, I kind of like finishing off where the thread already is, so it's a little bit of a hike up to get to the point. But then, of course, you'll just finish off lifting. Now you finally have your bowl cozy. Although you may want to iron it to make it look a little prettier enough, but you don't have to, of course. And it's 2 different patterns, maybe it's the same pattern, but you can choose whichever lovely side you want. And of course, it can go in the microwave, so as long as you have no metals or anything on your fabric, it can go in the microwave so you don't burn your fingers. Real fancy. Voila, congratulations, you now have a bowl cozy.